Man, I'm tired of playing crap. So here's a surprisingly good game from an unlikely source for once. This is Metal Force, released in 1994 for the Nintendo Family Computer or Nintendo Entertainment System or Dendy Computer System thing or equivalent video game console. Developed by South Korean developer Open Corporation, and yes, you hear that bit, you assume it's going to be hot garbage because unfortunately, it is an easy assumption to make since that's often the case with these sorts of games. But Metal Force is the rare exception in that not only is this unlicensed fare that does not blow a huge chunk, not only is this unlicensed fare that's actually pretty decent, but this is also a game that could easily be passed off as your sort of mid-tier platforming fare on NES that isn't revolutionary per se, but does enough to be a perfectly playable and genuinely enjoyable little game akin to some of the stuff from Taxon or some other company like that. Someone who isn't one of the heavy hitters but can produce a good game every so often. So you control a little robot dude and you're going through 7 levels, blasting robots with your weapons, seeking out power-ups, 1-ups, and continues, and eventually making your way to the end where you'll fight a boss, defeat it, and then move on to the next round. You have one of 2 weapons on hand, which alternate each time you pick up the swap item. Your default sword thing that shoots energy waves, and a boomerang weapon that covers less distance but can strike targets on the rebound. Both weapons can be powered up with power-up icons, but the only way to switch weapons is via those swapped icons, so it's a matter of knowing which weapons serve you best in which situations. Items are either dropped by enemies or found in these crates throughout the levels, which are mostly linear, but do have some alternate routes that could lead you to different items and such. That's the extent of the depth featured in Metal Force, however. You've got a couple alternate routes here and there, some goodies to uncover if you're curious enough to venture off the beaten path, but this is a pretty straightforward go from point A to point B, fight the boss at the end, repeat 6 more times, linear affair. I've heard some folks call this gameplay akin to that one game there, mostly because it involves robots, and honestly there's enough visual similarities that you could easily pass off some of the enemies featured here and maybe some of the level layouts as widely developed stock opposition for the old blue bomber. But as far as gameplay is concerned, I really don't see it. If anything, Metal Force has more of a Power Blade vibe to it. You need pickups to swap between your 2 weapons, and both cover a limited range at first but can be powered up to cover more distance, and whenever you die, you're back to basic power again. There's a bit of exploration but not much to it. Gameplay feels somewhat deliberately paced yet still moves fast enough, striking that rare balance not easily achieved. Control feels pretty good, fairly easy to pick up and play, pretty responsive. Challenge is firm but fair, with the levels being the real nutcracker in the package, although I wouldn't call the bosses a cakewalk either unless you've maxed out your weapons, and even then, a couple of them can be a bit of a struggle. You can collect lives and continues to extend the playtime if necessary, but there are no passwords or saves to be found. Metal Force looks pretty good, all things considered, with some large character sprites that are detailed and good looking in spite of the occasional bouts of flicker that will inevitably occur, though not all that often. The levels might follow similar themes and might look a bit samey at times, but do look pretty detailed and distinct. Would have been nice if they had more varied colors, though they're not all yellows and blues and such, but that's a minor quibble. Honestly, given its origins, it's a fairly impressive looking game with only the minimal of flicker encountered, and with virtually no slowdown plaguing the game, which is often quite the pleasant surprise with this sort of fare. Finally, we get the sound, which has a collection of fairly above average chiptunes to complement the action, which again is high praise for games of this sort. None of the usually scratchy, grindy, distorted sound quality you would expect out of an outfit like Hummer Team, for example, but rather you've got these rather pleasant sounding, almost lively stage themes that come close to being decent. Even the handful of sound effects come across as something close to mid-tier quality Famicom sound output, which is a step above the usual tripe from this area of gaming that's unlicensed and stuff. Now, let me tell you something, after a week of Superboy on the MSX SG-1000 Master System whatever slop, that's greatly appreciated. Overall, Metal Force proved to be a genuine surprise. It's not often I would come across an unlicensed game from one of those unlicensed territories, if you will, and expect something of exceptional quality, but Metal Force turned out to be a pretty solid, well-crafted, and really fun game to play. Like I said, controls feel nice and slick, the gameplay is simple and straightforward, the difficulty is firm but fair, and the overall presentation is miles above the usual unlicensed fare. It's one of those times where you can hold this up against the typical NES platforming fare and not blink an eye because it's such a natural fit. All in all, I rather liked Metal Force. It's a good, fun platformer. Give it a go.